It all seemed so perfect, a charming man, a dream wedding, a life that everyone envied. But beneath the surface, something dark was brewing, something I refused to see until it was almost too late. It began with a look, a conversation at a charity event, and just like that, my world was turned upside down. He was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, confident, attentive. He made me feel alive again, but I was blind to the truth that was right in front of me. You know how they say, if it's too good to be true, it probably is? Well, I learned that lesson the hard way. And now, as the pieces of my shattered life slowly start to fit together, I realize just how far this man's deceit went. What happened next wasn't something I could have ever predicted, and it's a story I'll never forget. Stay with me, and I'll show you how one man's lies can destroy everything you thought you knew about love, trust, and betrayal. Ready for the truth? Let me take you back to where it all began. Let me tell you who I am, because my story isn't one of fairy tale beginnings or smooth roads. My name is Martina. I'm 55 years old, and I've spent most of my life building a world that seemed perfect on the outside. I'm a successful woman, wealthy by many standards, but I've also known the sting of betrayal too many times to count. I don't say that with bitterness. I've learned that the hardest lessons come from the people we trust the most. The first man who ever made me believe in love, well, he walked away without a second glance. Left me with nothing but broken promises and a baby, Gold. He didn't even look back. I was devastated, of course, but I had no choice but to pick myself up. I was determined not to be a victim. But life, as it tends to do, had its own plans. Gold was born in the wake of that heartbreak. She was the reason I kept going when everything else fell apart. And despite the way her father disappeared from our lives, I always believed I was capable of giving her everything, except for the one thing she needed most. I couldn't give her a father, a man who would show her what a healthy, loving relationship looked like. But I did my best. Gold became my world. We built something together, just the two of us. Through thick and thin, we became inseparable. We moved into a beautiful home, surrounded by luxury and comfort. Yes, but more importantly, it was a safe haven, a place where we could forget about the world, forget about the lies and the disappointments. I could see that Gold had grown into a remarkable young woman, smart, independent, with a heart as fierce as mine. Still, love remained a distant memory for me. I swore off relationships long ago. After everything I'd been through, I couldn't imagine ever letting someone into my life again. Not the way I had with him. Not after being burned so many times before. But then came Lucas. It was at a charity event, the kind of high society gathering I attended out of obligation more than interest. Lucas was standing by the champagne table with that kind of energy that demanded attention without saying a word. He was different. Handsome, yes, but there was something more. Something about the way he carried himself, how he spoke with such ease, how his eyes seemed to look through you and yet make you feel like the most important person in the room. It didn't take long for our conversation to turn personal. He asked questions, thoughtful ones, questions about me, my life, my passions. He made me feel seen in a way that I hadn't felt in years. But what really struck me was how he seemed to listen, like he was genuinely interested in who I was, not just the person others saw on the outside. I should have been cautious. I should have known better. But in that moment, all I felt was hope. Hope for something real. Something that felt like love. And for the first time in a long time, I was willing to believe it. But Gold saw it all differently. "Mom, I don't like him," she said one evening after I had mentioned Lucas again. Her face was serious, her voice laced with concern. "There's something off about him. Please, don't ignore your instincts." I brushed it off. "I was just getting to know him," I told her. "He's just charming," I explained. But deep down, I should have listened. Gold had seen something I hadn't. And that would be the first of many signs that I was stepping into something much darker than I could ever have imagined. But I didn't see it. Not then. Not when I was so desperate to feel wanted, to feel loved again. The night I met Lucas was one of those high-profile charity events I used to attend out of habit. The kind of affair where everyone pretends to care about causes they'd never lift a finger for if it weren't for the social credit it brought them. I went because I had to, not because I wanted to. My mind was elsewhere, mostly on Gold. who had become my entire world. But then, across the room, I saw him. Lucas stood there, effortlessly pulling attention without trying. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, his posture confident but not overbearing. There was something about him that stood out from the rest of the crowd. He didn't seem like he was here for the same reasons the others were. His eyes, sharp and observant, seemed to take in everything around him without saying a word. But when he spoke, it was like the whole room suddenly became quiet, waiting for his next thought. I wasn't sure why, but I felt drawn to him. There was no immediate explanation for it, no spark, no fireworks, just a steady, calm feeling that I hadn't experienced in years. He approached me first, without hesitation, introducing himself with a smile that seemed genuine, unlike so many others who only smiled because it was expected. "You must be Martina," he said, his voice smooth like warm honey. "I've heard so much about you." It wasn't just the compliment that struck me, it was the way he said it. He wasn't trying to impress me or gain favor. It felt like he actually meant it, as though he was genuinely interested in who I was, not what I had. That feeling, rare as it was, stirred something deep inside me. It was the first time in a long time I felt seen. We talked for hours that night, but it felt like minutes. He asked about my work, my life, my past. Every question he asked seemed thoughtful, not out of obligation, but out of curiosity. I had spent years in the company of people who only cared about the money I brought to the table, but with him, it was different. Gold, of course, wasn't there that night. She had stayed home, preferring the quiet of our luxurious house to the clamour of these events. But the next day, when I mentioned Lucas, her face changed immediately. It wasn't a look of happiness or excitement, but something darker, something that made me hesitate. "I don't trust him, Mom," she said, her voice low, almost in warning. "Something's not right. He's too perfect. He's too interested in you for the wrong reasons." I sighed, dismissing her concern with a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. Gold had always been protective of me, perhaps overly so. I knew she was used to watching out for me, especially after everything I'd been through in my past relationships. But she had no reason to be suspicious, I told myself. Lucas was different. He didn't want me for my money. He seemed to care about me for who I was, and I hadn't felt that in years. I brushed her off with a casual, "He's just charming, sweetheart. Sometimes people are just interested in other people, you know?" But deep down, I knew she was right. There was something about Lucas that made me feel uneasy, even as I felt myself drawn to him. It was a quiet nagging in the back of my mind, something I didn't want to face. But the warmth I felt when he spoke to me, when he looked at me, drowned out that voice. And so I ignored it. I ignored the warnings, I ignored the doubts, and I allowed myself to fall. Slowly, steadily, I fell deeper into his world. We spent more time together after that night. It didn't take long before he was a regular part of my life. I invited him over for dinner, we went out on long walks, and we shared quiet evenings talking about everything, our hopes, our fears, our dreams. Lucas was always a perfect gentleman. He never rushed anything, never pushed too hard. He seemed content to let things unfold naturally. But the more time we spent together, the more I realized just how comfortable he made me feel. I thought, perhaps for the first time in years, that I might have found someone who actually cared for me. Not my money, not my status, but me. And yet, as I let my guard down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. But that was the problem, wasn't it? I was desperate for love, desperate to believe in something that felt real again, so I ignored my daughter's warnings. I convinced myself that Lucas was everything I had been waiting for, even as the nagging voice inside me continued to whisper, telling me to be careful. But I didn't listen, not yet. I was too lost in the possibility of love to hear the quiet warnings that were already beginning to take shape, and it would cost me more than I ever imagined. In the weeks after meeting Lucas, everything seemed perfect. There was a lightness to my step, an excitement I hadn't felt in years. Lucas was thoughtful, caring, and he had a way of making me feel like I was the most important person in the room. We spent hours talking about everything, life, dreams, and the future. He made me believe in something I had long since abandoned, love. Gold, of course, wasn't as enchanted as I was. She watched him closely, analysing every interaction, every word. I remember her first warning, clear as day. It was a late-night conversation, the kind where she could no longer hold back her concerns. "Mom, something's off about him," she said, her voice full of that protective instinct she always had. "I don't trust him. He's too smooth, too perfect. It feels like he's playing a role." At first, I brushed it off. She was always so cautious, too protective at times. This was different, though, I thought. Lucas was nothing like the others I had dated in the past. He didn't seem interested in my wealth or my status. He was interested in me. For the first time in years, I felt seen. But Gold's warnings stuck with me. I'd see her look at Lucas with those narrowed eyes, or the way she'd always seemed distracted when we were all together. It was clear that she didn't like him, but I couldn't see what she did. I didn't want to. I wasn't ready to face the possibility that the man I had begun to care for might not be who he seemed. Then came the proposal. It didn't take long for Lucas to drop the bombshell. After a whirlwind few months, during which he became a constant presence in our lives, he suggested we get married. He spoke so earnestly, with a passion that made my heart swell. He wanted to build a life with me, a real future. I could see the dream in his eyes, and in my own naive way, I let myself believe in it. What else could I do? I had found someone who seemed to get me, someone who cared about me, not just my money, not just the life I could provide, but me. And so, when Lucas proposed, I said yes. I was ready to take a leap of faith. He had promised that we would build something real together, something based on trust and love. I didn't even consider the possibility that Gold might have been right all along. After all, love had come to me in such an unexpected way, and I wasn't about to turn it down. The wedding was extravagant, of course, just as Lucas had suggested. He wanted to celebrate our love in style, and who was I to argue? We hosted a grand event with guests from all parts of my life. Everyone was thrilled. Everyone except Gold, who remained quiet but never fully at ease. I could see the hurt in her eyes, the way she tried to hide her concern, but I was too blinded by my excitement to see it. Everything seemed perfect from the outside, but as the days passed, the cracks began to show, ones I didn't want to acknowledge. Lucas started acting distant, spending more time away from home, and his explanations were always vague, evasive. I dismissed it as stress from work, or maybe he was just adjusting to married life. But even when I tried to reach out, to talk things through, something felt off. It was then that Gold's warnings turned into something sharper. She started asking questions I didn't want to answer. Where had Lucas been that night? Why did he come home so late? And why did his stories never seem to line up? But I shut her down every time. I refused to believe that the man I had married, the man I had trusted, could be hiding something. The more Gold pushed, the more defensive I became. How could she not see how happy I was? I wasn't going to let her spoil this for me. I had found something precious, something that felt real, and I wasn't about to let it slip away. I thought I could handle it all. After all, I was experienced in matters of the heart. But in this case, my heart wasn't the only one at stake. Gold's warnings, her doubts. What if she was right? What if the man I had fallen in love with wasn't the man I thought he was? But I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Not to myself, not to anyone. As the days passed, Gold's unease grew stronger, and so did my desire to ignore it. I convinced myself that Lucas was simply adjusting to married life, or that maybe he was just preoccupied with other things. But Gold wasn't backing down. She had always been determined, and when something didn't sit right with her, she wouldn't let it go. One evening, after yet another late-night confrontation with me, she disappeared for hours, not telling me where she was going. When she returned, her face was pale and her hands were shaking. "I found something," she said quietly, sitting me down. "Something about Lucas, something that's going to change everything." I didn't want to hear it. I really didn't. But I knew she wouldn't give up until I saw what she had uncovered. My heart pounded as she pulled out her phone and showed me a series of emails and social media messages. They were screenshots of Lucas's past, of women who had been left emotionally and financially destroyed, each one bearing striking similarities to me. Wealthy, older women, all of whom Lucas had charmed, married, and then drained of their resources. At first, I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing. My mind refused to believe it. How could this man, the man who had promised me everything, be capable of such cruelty? I wanted to deny it all, but the proof was there, staring me in the face. He had a pattern, a calculated method of taking advantage of women who were vulnerable, like me. Gold didn't stop there. She went further, digging deeper into his background. The more she uncovered, the worse it became. This wasn't just a few scattered instances, this was his MO. Marry, manipulate, and disappear with the wealth of his wives. I felt my world crumbling around me as I processed the truth. I wanted to scream, to run to Lucas and demand answers, but a part of me didn't want to know. I had to face it though, and as painful as it was, I knew it had to be done. Then came the final blow. Gold discovered something even more damning. Lucas was seeing someone else. A younger woman, someone he had been involved with for months. I couldn't believe it. My heart sank as the realization hit me like a freight train. He had been cheating on me the whole time. I stood there, speechless, as Gold calmly explained everything she had found. I wanted to fight it, to believe that there was some misunderstanding, but deep down I knew the truth. Lucas had never been in love with me. He had been using me, using my wealth, my loneliness, to fuel his own desires. I could feel my chest tighten as I struggled to breathe. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a betrayal of the deepest kind. I had let my guard down, opened my heart to someone who had only wanted to take. I had trusted him, and now I was shattered. Gold was right all along. The warnings, the doubts, I had dismissed them all, too blind to see the truth. And now I was paying the price. The moment I saw the way Lucas was looking at Gold, something in me snapped. It was subtle at first, a lingering glance, a comment that made my stomach churn. But then it escalated, the way he spoke to her, the way his hand brushed against hers. It was wrong, and I knew it, but I didn't want to believe it. Not from the man I had once trusted. I had been so caught up in the whirlwind of love and the devastation of betrayal that I hadn't noticed what was happening right under my nose. Everything had felt off for a while, but it wasn't until Gold spoke up that the truth hit me. She was terrified, her eyes wide with fear, her hands trembling. "Mom, he's making me uncomfortable. He's crossing a line," she said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, you have to see it." I froze. My heart dropped as I saw the fear in her eyes, the same fear I hadn't noticed before. I didn't know what she was talking about, but my stomach churned with the sudden realization that something was wrong. Looking back, I could see the subtle signs now, the lingering looks, the compliments that had seemed so innocent at the time. At first, I thought he was just being affectionate, maybe overly so, but nothing alarming. He'd say things like, "You're growing into such a beautiful woman, Gold," or "You're really turning heads these days." I thought he was just being kind, maybe even a little too complimentary, but I brushed it off. But nothing prepared me for what I saw when Gold showed me the text Lucas sent to her. It was a message from him, simple but loaded with a darkness I couldn't comprehend. "Meet me at the hotel tonight. Room 305. It's quiet there, just the two of us." I thought it was a mistake at first, maybe a random message sent to the wrong person. But then there was another one and another, each more insistent than the last. He was telling her to keep it a secret, to come alone. "You don't understand how much this would mean to me," he'd said. "We'll be alone. No one will know." My breath caught in my throat as the truth settled in. He wasn't just being inappropriate. He was trying to lure her into something sinister, something that made my skin crawl. I could feel the panic rising in my chest. How had I missed this? How had I not seen the signs? My mind raced back to all the times I had shrugged off his behavior, thinking I was being overly sensitive. But this was real. This was dangerous. I had to stop it. I had to protect her. But I felt paralyzed, unsure of what to do, terrified of what he might do if I confronted him. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Lucas, the man I had married, the man I had chosen over my own daughter's warnings, was now a threat to her. The man who had once promised me love, security, and devotion was capable of something far darker. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Gold, my daughter, the only person in this world who had never betrayed me. I wasn't about to let Lucas destroy the bond we had built over the years. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to act fast. My heart was breaking into pieces as I realized the extent of Lucas's manipulation. I needed proof. I needed to know everything. With a heavy heart, I made the decision to hire a private investigator. I knew it was a step I couldn't take back, but I also knew that without it, I would never have the full picture. I needed irrefutable evidence of Lucas's deceit, something that would prove to me and to Gold that he wasn't just some charming man who had gotten in over his head. He was a predator. The investigator, a sharp and determined man, quickly uncovered what I had feared but refused to accept. Lucas wasn't just after my money, he was after control. Every action he took, every word he spoke was part of a calculated game. The investigator dug into his past relationships and found more victims, women who had once been in my shoes, deceived by the same smooth-talking man, left with nothing but shattered hearts and empty bank accounts. The evidence came pouring in, bank transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, fake business dealings, and worst of all, photos of Lucas with yet another woman, confirming the affair Gold had discovered months before. It was all there. The mountain of proof I had so desperately needed. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. It was like everything I had ever believed in had been a lie. The man I had married, the man I had loved, was nothing more than a predator. And now, with this evidence in hand, I had no choice but to face the truth. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that he had been playing both Gold and me from the very beginning. I felt a cold, bitter fury rise up inside me as I realized the depths of his manipulation. He had destroyed everything: my trust, my peace, my family, and I had been too blinded by love to see it. But now there was no turning back. It was time to take control. For Gold, for me, for the future we had to rebuild. The weight of the decisions I had made over the past few weeks pressed down on me. The divorce papers were signed and the charges against Lucas were filed. It felt surreal, almost as though I was watching someone else go through it all. This wasn't supposed to be my life, but it was, and there was no turning back. I had to follow through. For Gold, for myself, for the truth. The courtroom battles were nothing short of brutal. Lucas, ever the smooth talker, tried to convince everyone that I was the crazy, heartbroken woman who couldn't see the truth. But I wasn't alone in this fight. As the hearings progressed, other women, victims of his charm and manipulation, came forward, corroborating the stories I had learned through the investigator. They had been victims of Lucas's cruel game too, each one shattered by his lies, their lives drained emotionally and financially. The evidence was undeniable, and his facade crumbled under the weight of his past. Each new victim who spoke out was another blow to Lucas's carefully constructed world. But it wasn't just about the legal victory anymore. It was about the healing, the rebuilding of trust, and the reclamation of the peace that he had stolen from us. Gold stood by my side every step of the way. She had always been my rock, but this experience forged an even stronger bond between us. I saw her strength in ways I never had before. We were no longer just mother and daughter. We were allies, partners in survival, navigating the wreckage of what had been our life before Lucas entered it. Through every tear, every moment of doubt, we learned to lean on each other. I didn't know what the future held, but with Gold by my side, I felt ready to face it. We didn't need anyone else. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. As the final gavel came down in the courtroom, Lucas was sentenced. The victory felt hollow at first. Justice had been served, but the scars of the past would remain. However, in that moment, I knew we would heal. The darkness was behind us, and we were stepping into a new chapter, one where we would define our own happiness. Through this all, I learned the true meaning of strength. It wasn't just in standing tall during the storm, it was in knowing when to protect what mattered most, and being able to walk away from the things that threatened that peace. I had been broken, betrayed, and humiliated, but I was still standing, and so was Gold. Together, we had learned to trust again, not just in each other, but in ourselves. And that was the real victory. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize how much has changed. What once felt like a life torn apart by betrayal has slowly transformed into something I could never have imagined. The pain of Lucas's deceit, the way he made me question my own worth, still stings, but it no longer defines me. It no longer defines us. Through the turmoil, I've come to understand a fundamental truth. Strength doesn't come from external sources. It doesn't come from the validation of others or even from the victories we win in courtrooms. True strength, the kind that gets you through the hardest of times, comes from within. It comes from that quiet voice inside that refuses to give up, from the fierce determination to protect what matters most, from the love and trust we build with those who truly have our backs. Gold has been my pillar throughout this journey. I've always known she was strong, but in these dark days, I saw her shine in ways I never expected. She's not just my daughter, she's my equal, my partner. In her, I found a reflection of my own resilience, and together, we have faced the storm. We've emerged not just as survivors, but as stronger, more aware versions of ourselves. Lucas's betrayal almost tore us apart, but in the end, it only made us stronger. The lies, the manipulation, it all faded into the background as we rebuilt our lives on our own terms. And now, as I look forward, I know the lessons we've learned will guide us through whatever comes next. This story isn't just about betrayal and heartbreak. It's about the power of family, the unbreakable bond between mother and daughter, and the undeniable strength that comes from trusting your instincts. No matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how hard the fall, we can rise again together. So to anyone out there who has faced betrayal, who has felt the sting of a broken heart, remember this: you are stronger than you think. Trust yourself, trust those who truly love you, and never ever let anyone steal your peace. You have the power to rise, to heal, and to move forward. Thank you for being a part of this journey with me. I hope my story serves as a reminder that no matter the darkness, there's always light on the other side.